It is day 3 of Beastmen Week. I was thinking to myself, what's the most exciting thing that I can dig into that hasn't been fully fleshed out yet? And I think it is the awful, horrifying leadership bomb, terror-causing, trying to, scream your opponent off the board with Devolve, that sort of playstyle. I think there's a lot of meat to be dug into there, so let's have a look. First things first, let's look at the ways that you can benefit from leadership debuffing, because it's all well and good being able to drop your opponent's leadership, but what are the ways that you're going to be able to benefit from it, apart from, making break tests more scary, generally just, if you do some damage to your opponent, make them panic, that sort of jobby. So, what are the things that we can bring? Well, first of all, we've got Devolve, and Devolve is an interesting spell in that it's very similar to the Banshee Scream that you may have seen that vampire counts can have. It's better in some ways, and it's worse than others. So the way that it works is it is a spell, so your opponents can interact with it. They're able to dispel it instead of you just automatically getting it off. It's a 15-inch range magic missile that casts on an 8, so nice and easy to get off. And your opponent takes a leadership test. If they fail the test, it loses a number of wounds equal to the amount by which it failed the test. Where is that better than a Banshee Scream? You don't get ward saves. Because you lose wounds, you don't get any saves at all. They just come straight off the profile. It's unlikely that, a dragon is going to fail by 7 or 8, but if you put enough leadership modifiers into it, your opponent rolls a double 6, you might just bang that thing right out of existence straight away, which is pretty horrifying and something that we have to really respect the ability of if you're going to play some sort of playstyle where you're looking to drop your opponent's leadership. Second of all, we've got Devolve again, but this time we've got it in terms of Kalmore. Kalmore, you may have seen him already, a 245-point Great Brave Shaman, so he can't be taken in the Minotaur detachment, but he can be taken in Grand Army or in the Wild Herd. He has access to Dark Magic and Primal Magic, all well and good, but he also has a Leering Spirit, the nice little model that comes with him. It is a marker that you can place anywhere on the battlefield, outside of 8 inches of the enemy unit. So when you deploy, you can put it anywhere, which means you can put it wherever you need it to be. Suddenly, you've got a 15-inch range magic missile that can start 8 inches away from someone. Put it in the middle of the board, very hard for them to avoid. How does it work? It lets you cast Devolve from the marker as if it was a bound spell level 3, and you can't remove it. There's no way to interact with this apart from killing Kalmore. So you can put this, if you're in a very difficult matchup, for example, you can use this, try and bomb your opponent's leadership, you can cast from here and then stay safe with the rest of the list, or you can use it to try and corral your opponent into a certain part of the board. Lots of different ways that you can play around with it, but at face value, if you place it in a decent spot, you're just getting a second Devolve, still casting at +3 with no risk of miscast. That's pretty spicy. Fear and Terror. Now these might seem obvious, but they're definitely worth talking about, because in this case, we're going to be potentially terror bombing things off the table. If you reduce your opponent's leadership to the point where they're going to fail their leadership test 50% or around that point, suddenly it's very scary for them to be anywhere near anything that can cause terror and that can charge. Now, the main problem with this is which terror cause do we look at, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on in more detail, but you can't choose the Gigantic Chaos Spawn because they don't declare a charge. They just random move in. Your opponent never has to take a terror test if they go in because they're not declaring a charge. There's no charge reaction. So that is a little bit of a shame. Other than that, Shaggoths are pretty good. They're very tanky and they do a decent amount of damage, but they don't have Swift Stride. You've got the new Praeton, which we will talk about more, which is very good in terms of trying to do leadership shenanigans, but it doesn't have Swift Stride. Then you've got the other bits and pieces. You've got the Jabber Scythe and the Cockatrice, which do have Swift Stride and do cause terror and are large targets, so can always declare into units, even if they're hiding behind other things. But those units are pretty ineffective. They don't do a lot. They're pretty squishy for the points. So finding which terror cause you want to go with is definitely something that's a little bit difficult. If you've got a way of building into the Minotaur detachment, the Blood Herd, you could go with the Gift of Chaos that comes from the Warriors of Chaos list, which gives you another debuff in there for terror causes that you can put on your Doom Ball. I don't think that's worth doing. I think it'd be really difficult to do the amount of debuffing of leadership that you need in the Blood Herd, but something to consider if you want to go more melee and then just have that aspect of it as well. Followed up, Fear Causes. Now this is a little bit easier. We will talk about these more, but it's basically your monstrous infantry and cavalry. Dragon Ogres, Minotaurs, Dragon Ogres, Dragon Ogres. You get the picture here. Dragon Ogres are very, very good. And the way that it's going to work in here is your Fear Causes can also become Terror Causes. So despite fear not actually being all that important, it's more your opponent has to test to charge you if you've got a higher unit strength than them, which in the case of like a Dragon Ogre, probably not going to happen most of the time. If you make the unit upgrade from terror to fear, effectively, sorry, fear to terror, then suddenly that little 70-point character or unit champion is going to be able to terror bomb things itself, which is a real problem your opponent has to deal with. The other one, actually, that I should point out is the Razorgore. Razorgore are fantastic because not only do they have the fear that can be upgraded to terror, they have Swift Stride, and they're super cheap, and they come in core. So that's a really good thing to build around. You're probably taking at least 3 of them anyway. Speaking of fear and terror causes, and the Praeton, which doesn't have Swift Stride itself, does have another leadership-based rule in Endless Malice. Now, this is if you win a round of combat and then choose to restrain, which it does only have leadership 6, but it can benefit from the leadership of your general, so that's not too bad. Enemy units within 6 inches of it must take a panic test as if a nearby friend had been destroyed. Potentially you can make them, that's a lot of issues. So you can cause them to take a panic test. You only ever have to take 1 panic test per phase, so you can't just double stack the panic tests. But what you can do is put them in a position where your opponent's fled from you, you've broken them, you think, it's a fallback in good order, or it's a give ground. You're never going to actually get any value out of that other than just being locked in combat and trying to kill them next turn. Test to restrain, suddenly everyone around them takes a panic test. You've debuffed with, -2 leadership and potentially turns off the ability for you to use the general's leadership as well. Things start to run away. I think that's an interesting way to build. It's just a little bit clunky to use because it's a fly 10 unit, which is great with a large target, but no Swift Stride. So you can't hide it around your units. You've kind of just got a front and center, moving up the board and get some use out of it there. The next 2 both come from the lore of Primal Magic, and I think these are really solid. So first of all, we've got In the Gloaming Wildwood. This is a hex with a 15-inch range, which is not too bad. That's pretty reasonable range. Cast on a 10, and it's a Remains in Play spell. While Remains in Play, and you target an enemy unit, the unit fears everything. So if your unit doesn't have fear, suddenly it fears your Gore, it fears your Tuskor Chariots. But if they already cause fear, it upgrades that fear to terror. So Dragon Ogres, Razorgore, suddenly they cause terror specifically in the unit that you've hexed. I think this is really good. Obviously, you're going to want to put this on a unit that's going to be potentially taking multiple charges because you can take multiple terror tests. So if I'm going to put a Dragon Ogre and 2 Razorgores into it, even if you're leadership 8 or 9, there's a good chance that you fail one of those. And then with the Swift Stride of the Razorgore, I have a half-decent chance of being able to catch you as well. So a nice little piece here that you can use to make things fear you. It's also just nice to have in your back pocket. If you're worried about having to charge something, or you're worried that you're going to get charged by something that's, potentially scary, you have to take a charge from a dragon. Cast this on the dragon. Suddenly, the unit that it's charging causes fear, downgrades that terror to fear, and they don't have to take a leadership test, and you're not going to run away from leadership bombs. Next up, we've got the sister spell to this, and I like how the names sort of combine and follow on from each other. Neath the Shaden Woadspan. This is a magical vortex that casts on a 10, again, Remains in Play, and it's a 5-inch large blast template within 15 inches of the caster. So remember, that's the central hole. So with it being 5 inches, you're effectively putting the central hole 15 inches away. There's an extra 2.5 inches of template there, and then anything within 6 inches of it has a debuff to it as well, which is, negative to ballistic skill, and it's useful for blocking line of sight. So it's just a good spell in general. But on top of that, if any enemy unit ends its movement within 3 inches of the template, they have to take a panic test. If they fail, they flee directly away from the nearest enemy unit, which is not fleeing. So I believe that means that you have to go straight to... you'd still be falling back in good order if you're over half. But again, just making it so you're blocking line of sight for potentially missile units or units that want to come forwards. The unit comes forwards. It's in or next to the template, within the 3, has to take a panic test. You've layered some debuffs on them, so they're -2, let's say, to leadership. They fail the leadership test. Suddenly, all that movement that they've spent going forwards, they're now further back because they've had to fall back in good order. Or best case scenario, you've lit them up with a couple of spells and now they're below half strength and they actually run away. That can be quite nice for you as well. The final ways that I think you can benefit from using leadership debuffing are the Jabberslythe and the Cygor. I don't think these are worth running, but I have included them because if I don't, someone's going to put them in the comments. So the Jabberslythe has an 8-inch aura that during the command phase of your turn, so keep in mind you have to move forwards and then after your opponent's entire turn, still be within 8 inches of enemy units. Enemy units that take a leadership test, if they fail, they take D3 strength 3 hits with no armor or regen save. That's just not enough to be worth. You know, you're leaning into the debuffing, so they're more likely to fail, but I don't really care that my opponent's Dragon Ogre Shartak takes, you know, a leadership test, let's say on a 6. Oh, never mind, they failed it. Cool, I'll take D3, strength 3 hits, I'll maybe take 1 wound. That doesn't really move the needle for me. Also, you know, there is the Cygor, and the Cygor's a little bit different. This is more magic defense. It's an enemy wizard within 12 inches of Cygor has to make a leadership test to cast. And they also miscast as well if they failed to, fail the leadership test. This sounds like it would be good protection, and in theory it is, but realistically, a Cygor is very expensive. It doesn't do a lot. It doesn't want to be super far forwards, so it's probably not going to be in range of a wizard, and even with the leadership debuffing, they might just pass it anyway. So I don't think this does it for me. I'm going to be ignoring these two as terror causes in terms of building my list. Moving on, what are the ways that we have to debuff our enemy's leadership? Well, there's a lot of the classic of examples. There's no necromancy, which is the big downside to this, and that's maybe going to cause issues in terms of getting your leadership debuffing to the level where you're just absolutely ruining people with leadership 4, but there are still ways around it. So the first of all, we've got Demonology, one of the lords available to the Brave Shamans, and there is a spell called Gathering Darkness. Now, it's a 12-inch range hex, but it is effectively the same as the Necromancy Hex, just of a lower range. It's -2 to initiative, which is fine. Sometimes that's going to matter. -2 to leadership to a minimum of 2, and the enemy can't use their general's inspiring presence special rule. You can't cast it into combat. So this is fine. It's not the most exciting, but it is, if you're wanting to go for a second caster, probably the direction that you go with that. I think I'm leaning more towards a single caster for this, but again, if you're doing it, we probably go Demonology, and because you've got less of a good less of a good character in the unit, you can't also go for Beast Lord or Doombull. You're going to lean on stuff like Demonic Vessel and Demonic Vigor to really supercharge up the unit and to supercharge up the characters that you put in there as well. And it does give you the flexibility of Steed of Shadows, so you can fly around the board. And again, if you want to, you can take Lore Familiar and still have a decent magic missile. It's not Viletide, but the summoning is a pretty decent magic missile. 2d6 strength 4 hits at AP1. That's not too shabby at all. Speaking of magic, let's go back to the primal magic and Primordial Gloom, which is the signature spell, so you can always swap into that no matter how you're equipped or what you're doing, is a magical vortex, again, remains in play, casts on a 9 with a 12-inch range. You put a small 3-inch blast template, so again, remember that it's 12 inches and then plus an extra 1.5 inch of range on the template, and the template doesn't move, it's stationary, counts as dangerous terrain, enemies within 6 inches of the template are -1 to leadership, and treat open ground as difficult terrain. This is going to slow things down, it's going to make people, it's going to be more difficult for your opponent to get to you, a little bit, not all that much, but it's still nice to have. More importantly, it's that leadership debuff, it's a signature spell, it's very easy to get hold of, and it's a really nice counter to Fanatics. Anytime Fanatics hit terrain, they die. So if they go within 6 inches of that template, which, keep in mind, that's 6 inches on either side of a 3-inch template, that is a 15-inch bubble, you can just make it really difficult for your opponent to put Fanatics down. So I really like this spell, and I think it's probably something we're going to hinge around building, really. On to magic items, and there aren't any new magic items that debuff the enemy, but in the Forces of Fantasy book that Beastmen already had, there are 2 items that people have been playing around with already. This is not me just going, ooh, Terror's really good, suddenly. This is something that Beastmen players have already sort of dabbled in, and I think these new aspects to it make it a more appealing build that you can maybe go with. So, starting off, we've got the Mangelder. For 40 points, you've got the wielder of the Mangelder causes terror. It's not the best weapon, it's strength +1, AP -1, so it's the sort of thing that you probably put on, let's say, a support character, like a BSB, or if you've got 40 points spare on a wizard, you can absolutely do that there as well. The wielder causes terror. Any enemy unit that suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds from the Mangelder suffers a -1 to their leadership characteristic until end of turn. This stacks with the -1 for being a terror causer, so just base, if you win combat and you've done an unsaved wound, the opponent's going to be testing at -2 leadership before any spells or other remains in play abilities have come into effect. So quite a nice little weapon. Ideally you want to do a wound with it, so maybe like a Warg or BSB is the best place for it, but like I say, if you just need the terror effect, you can put it on the wizard inside of a unit. Next up, we've got a standard, and there is another standard I want to talk about in a second, but this one is the Manbane standard, and any enemy units within 6 inches of this model are -1 to their leadership. Again, always to a minimum of 2. If I can get my opponent's leadership to 2, I am very happy. I'm not worried about going less than that. But for 40 points, this is a really good standard. Not only can it go on a BSB, it can also just go on a unit of Gore. You know, they can take 50-point magic banners. So this is something that you can put into the list very simply. -1 to leadership, again, this is sort of the rate that we're looking at. We're going to try and stack 4 or 5 of these. That's the thinking. Just very quickly, I should mention the Gore banner. It's a new magic standard for 50 points, and it means that if your opponent wants to charge the unit that carries the Gore banner, they have to take a leadership test. If they fail, they cannot charge, and they count as having made a fail charge, so they don't get to move on top of it. I think this is good, but I don't really want to stop my opponent from charging me. It does get around immune to psychology. It does get around, terror causes, so maybe this is something that makes it into the list, but it's not in my first draft of the list. I think it's interesting. It just, at 50 points to stop my opponent getting close to me when I want to punch them, because that's always the Beastman backup plan. It doesn't quite do it for me, but I think it is interesting. Then we're on to the Herdstone. I think you're going to see one of these in basically every Beastman army, so get used to it. Even if you're not a Beastman player, do check out the rules for these. They are very good. You're going to see them a lot. You can only have 1 per army, but like I say, every Beastman army is going to have one. It's a piece of terrain or a special feature which can't be destroyed, so, it's always going to be there. And if the Beastman player controls it, there are a lot of buffs that they get. Magic resist, there is +1 to cast for their wizards, and you can reroll some wounds in combat. The thing we care about the most for this build specifically is the Fearsome Edifice. This means that if you've got an enemy unit within 12 inches of a Herdstone that's controlled by a Beastman player, which again, very easy to do, have a single unit within range which has unit strength 5, and be the closest to it. Enemy units suffer a -1 modifier to their leadership characteristic when making leadership tests due to fear, panic, or terror. That's not everything, but it's most of the things we care about. So it doesn't work for Devolve. That might be too good, but it is, if we're trying to, terror bomb people off the table, you can have a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth or a Praeton or whatever terror causer you want controlling the Herdstone. You can declare the charge. Your opponent has to take the terror test at -1 because they're in range of the thing that's being controlled by a Beastman player, and then you just charge off with the thing that was controlling the Herdstone. It doesn't necessarily need to go that way, but I think it is just fun that you can have a monster that causes terror do it all in one. It can be giving the debuff to the unit and then charging out of range of the Herdstone as well. So that's quite nice. Plus, it's just good to have. So whether or not you're looking to do leadership shenanigans or not, put one of these in your Beastman armies. Finally, we've got Kalmore, and we've talked a little bit about Kalmore. He's a level 4 wizard. He can have primal magic. He's got the Leering Spirit that lets him do Devolve. He can take Devolve himself. All of that's great. He's super tanky. He's T5 with 4 wounds and a 4-up ward save, I should say. He doesn't really hit very hard in combat, but that's fine. He is blind. What else does he do? He just has, a leadership aura, enemy units within 6 inches are at -1 leadership as well. He just brings that 245 points. Often when you're bringing an upgraded Bray Shaman, you're going to spend more than that. Sure, you might have a chariot, but it is not hard to fit a character into Beastman that is less than a quarter of your total, character points. I think Kalmore is going to be a must pick for a lot of Beastman lists. The only downside is he can't take the Hagtree Fetish, so he's not going to be going, doing the Vile Tide that spits out 1,000,000 wounds. But if you don't need that as part of your game plan, I think he is an upgrade over most great Bray Shaman, and I'm really excited to be putting him on the table as well. Quick whiz through the key units. What are we going to look to put in the army list when we're building it? Herdstone. It gives you points. It gives you buffs. Always take this. Kalmore. If we're doing leadership shenanigans, Kalmore gives you a double Devolve. Also gives you the ability to, have that -1 leadership debuff. Just a great caster. You can go for a second Great Bray Shaman. I think if you're doing that, suddenly Demonology becomes a lot more exciting. But the problem is both of the ways that you can run this list do cap you on your Bray Shamans, but also your melee characters. And I think you need a melee character. So for me, I'm not going down the second Great Bray Shaman line, but it is a very good way to do it. Then we've got Fear and Terror Causes. We've got Dragon Ogres, or secondary to Dragon Ogres, we've got Minotaurs, but really it's Dragon Ogres. We've got Dragon Ogre Shartax, which is meant to was meant to say Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. I've obviously been playing too much Warriors of Chaos. But Dragon Ogre Shaggoths, obviously a great Terror Causer there. You can now get them up to a 2-up armor save with a 5-up ward through the full plate Chaos armor. Have them running around, be fairly tanky, doing a reasonable amount of damage with their strength 8, putting some stomps out there as well. I really do like Shartax in this sort of list. And then we've also got the Praeton. I've put Cockatrice in brackets. Now, the Cockatrice is, let me be frank, a bad unit. So why am I putting it in brackets here? Well, I don't think it does the job better, but the Cockatrice has a very similar sort of stat line in terms of defensive profile. T5, 4 wounds, has heavy armor and no other defenses, but it has Swift Stride. Now, the downside is it doesn't bring any other good rules. Well, realistically, it doesn't bring any good rules. Stony Stare is fine, it's not particularly great. The hand weapon attacks are going to do absolutely nothing, whereas the Praeton actually can do some decent damage in combat with its stomp attack and its horns. So I don't think I want to pay 170 points for a Cockatrice when I could pay 160 for a Praeton. But if I put this list together and I find that actually I just want a little bit more reach with my terror bombing, maybe I swap a Cockatrice in, because I think it's an interesting premise. You can also only take one Praeton, so if we're going Grand Army, that is. You can only take one Praeton in Grand Army. If you find you want a second Praeton, Cockatrice is a poor imitation, but maybe something you play around with there. So, I've mostly just put it here so that people don't tell me in the comments that I need to put it in. I don't think it's going to do the job, but it is an option there. Now, the Banshee in the room. We need a backup plan. Why do we need a backup plan? Some key units or entire armies are immune to psychology or have veteran. That sucks for us, because if you're immune to psychology, you're not taking fear, panic, or terror. If you have frenzy, you are immune to fear, panic, and terror. And if you have veteran, you're re-rolling your fear, panic, and terror. So Bretonnian Exiles still are a little bit vulnerable to leadership shenanigans, but they're a lot less vulnerable to leadership shenanigans. Undead are completely immune outside of stuff where it says make a leadership test, not make a fear test or something like that. So you can still devolve undead, which is fine. Sis of Avalon, again, if you're seeing that big unit of 30 teleporting around the board, they're never going to run away. You've got to deal with them the old-fashioned way, at which point Viletide just is a lot more exciting. And then stuff like Fungus Wine for Night Goblins. If you're facing off against the big unit of 90 or 100 goblins that teleports around with Travel Mystical Pathways, they almost always bring some characters that have Fungus Wine. This does make them immune psychology. Because they're immune psychology, they're not going to run away from, the dragon that's trying to charge them, or in this case, the beastmen that are pretending to be dragons. So these are things that we have to factor in, and these are some of the things that are really popular in the meta as well. So is that enough to kill the army in terms of it's got so many bad matchups? I don't think so. Because we have a backup plan. Devolve still works, and Undead actually have pretty poor leadership across the board, with the exception of the General. The General is going to give a leadership 8 or leadership 9 bubble, depending on what rule set you're using, and that's okay. But if you've got something along the lines of not a Banshee, but Hexwraith, for example, or you're looking at some of the Tomb King stuff as well, you don't normally have to make a leadership test for it. And then suddenly you do, and you go, oh, hold on a second, this is terrible. So Devolve still works. Devolve can still put in work against Undead. Less for killing the big bricks, but more for sniping the things that you're worried about that you don't have other answers to. A lot of the ethereal stuff, for example. Poor leadership also means big crumbles. If you can lower the leadership of Undead by 2 or 3, you've killed 2 or 3 models when you win combat. That's just nice to have. And while it's not going to be the be-all and end-all, a lot of stuff that you've got remains in play, so if that hangs around, you're going to get successive turns of it. Or even if it's just a hex that you've put on your enemy, you get 2 turns of it. Your turn and then their turn until it falls off at the start of your next turn. So I think there's some good value there. What is the rest of the backup plan? Because that's all well and good and just being like, oh, it just still works. We've got to bring units that still function solo while also being part of the whole. This is something that we see if you try to bring a combo list. Now, combo, if just to go to a card game example, something like Magic the Gathering, you've got a 60-card deck. You can bring 4 copies of each card. That means you're actually pretty likely to be able to find the card you're looking for, and you're also going to be able to use something called tutors, where you go, I play this card, it lets me look for a specific card, suddenly I've got the thing that I need for my combo. Now, while you don't need to find things for a combo, you need to have things work in the way that you want them to in Warhammer, you need to be able to cast spells that go off. You need to be able to bring things to bear in position. You need to be able to maneuver correctly. That's not always going to work out the way that you want it to. So you still need to bring units that are just generically good. So at their base, you're just going, I'm still a Beastman list that also has this extra spice on top of it. And I think that's the real way to build this list. If we just say, I want to go all in on terror, I'm going to bring loads of giants because giants cause terror, I think you're going to lose a lot of games. If we bring the good stuff and then go, here's the leadership spice on top of it, I think that's where the list starts to shine. Finally, back to undead, because that's going to be a big problem just in terms of when you go to like an event or your local gamer group, probably lots of them play undead. They're very popular at the moment. Beastmen just excel at chewing through units of undead. If you can get there, high quantity of attacks is really good against undead. So you're kind of set up already to have decent success against undead, which is really nice to have. Lastly, before we get into looking at building the list itself, Grand Army or Wild Herd? Well, both have upsides. They can both take Razor Gore in core, but there's less core tax in Grand Army. You both have to take either a unit of Gore or the Primal Herd, or Primal Gore, something along those lines. The unit of Gore, you can take 5 models, whereas the Primal Herd, you have to take at least 20. That pushes me towards Wild Herd. Pushes me towards Grand Army. Wild Herd does get free access to Primal Magic, but if you're only running one wizard, that's not too much of an issue, because you can just go Kalmore. I think Kalmore's really good. I'm pretty happy just to roll in the spells. Yes, there is a risk that you won't get the ones that you want, but I think the whole package that he brings, it's kind of worth just going straight for Kalmore, and then maybe you consider bringing a level 2 with a Power Scroll and a Lore Familiar. That could be something you do. And then also Grand Army has access to Doom Bulls. Now, you need some sort of killy character, I think. If we're not going down the lines of like a poison shooting brick, I think you need some sort of melee threat. You need something that can chunk through, stodgy units that get you tied up in combat. You need something that can threaten a dragon or whatever the equivalent is. You want to make it so that if you get charged by, I don't know, a Bretonnian Lord, it's not just you auto lose. You've got something that makes them reconsider their life choices. So it buys you more time, buys you positioning space, and when you actually do get there, you're able to win combats as well. So Grand Army has access to Doom Bulls. I think Doom Bulls are the best characters you can make. Even if you're not going Blood Herd, you're not going for any of the extra stuff, you're not going for Wild Herd, so you get extra points on their builds, which would be really nice to do, to be clear. Just going for a Doom Bull, I think, is really solid. If you go Wild Herd, you can go for a Beast Lord who's just got 125 points worth of magic items, which kind of bridges the gap a little bit, but I like the inherent toughness of the Doom Bull that you can layer stuff on top of. So what does that turn into? What sort of list are we looking at building? So let's put together a list for this sort of terror bombing style shenanigans, and I'm going to start with Grand Army. I think that's what leans more into my personal preferences, but you absolutely can do it as the Wild Herd as well. So starting off with Grand Army, we've got, we're going to start off with, I think, a Doom Bull. I want to have a Doom Bull in here because, again, sometimes leadership shenanigans aren't going to work. What are we going to do? I think there's a lot of ways you could go. I'm just going to default to Ogre Blade, Chaos Armor, and... where's it gone? Chaos Armor is... there we go. Heavy Chaos Armor for the Armor Save and the Ward Save, Shield, Ogre Blade because it makes you really punchy, and then Slug Skin as well, making you -1 to be hit. This is not the beefiest character. You may find that you want to lean more defensive, or you may find you want to somehow lean more offensive, but this is just sort of a generic placeholder character, which I think, Doom Bull that does lots of damage, that's what I want my general to be, so we're going to start off there. Then we're going to go with Kalmore. I think Kalmore brings a huge amount to the list. I'm going to give him Primal Magic, just happy with that as an overall piece. Then we are going to go with a Warhoof as well. Sorry, a Wargore, not a Warhoof. The Wargore is going to be a BSB. And how many points we got? We want it to carry some sort of banner. We're probably going to give the core unit of Gore the banner we spoke about, the Manbane Standard, this one here. So instead of giving the Manbane Standard to the Wargore, which is, you always want to... you want to make sure that the BSB is not the thing carrying the expensive banner if possible, because then it's much easier to kill than it is to kill the entire unit that's carrying the banner. But yeah, so let's just start off with the War Banner. I think that's probably where we want to go. We could go Banner of Outrage, but I think War Banner is going to be more valuable here just across a whole host of games. Then we want to make it tanky, so let's go... We'll give it a Great Weapon, but you don't have to use the Great Weapon depending on what you roll on the Primal Fury with Foe Render for the hand weapon, AP as well. So I think let's just go with full plate Chaos Armor, 4-up save, and a 5-up ward, and we'll give him a shield as well. Keeps him nice and cheap, brings, you know, the utility of having the standard in there, just nice to have in general. Into core, we're going to have to take at least one unit of gore, not best of gore, take a unit of gore. And I think this is probably going to be the unit that we bunker the character in. I do like a unit of gore that carries around a Doom Bull and then the Wizard and the BSB. It's quite a nice little Death Star. You can get up the board reasonably well with it as well because they've got good movement. Just base movement 5 is not too bad for infantry. So let's start off with full command. We're going to give him a great weapon because we can. Manbane standard, as mentioned, you can always put, you know, if you can put the better banner on the unit champion, the unit music. The unit standard bearer always do. And then we've got hand weapon shields or additional hand weapons. I default to additional hand weapons. I wonder whether shields is going to be better because realistically almost none of the unit's going to attack. But that's fine. We're just going to stick here with additional hand weapons for now, and maybe after some playtesting that's something that gets tweaked. Next up, we are going to go for the classic. These things are great, as mentioned. Razor Gore, super efficient unit. They're relatively tough, T5 with 3 wounds. They've only got a light armor save, but they're 52 points. They've got Swift Stride. They've got some impact hits. They hit pretty hard if they pass that, Primal Fury test on a Leadership 6. So we're going to go with 3 of them, assuming that most places are running with sort of a classic rule of 3, where you can only take 3 of the same unit. Moving on, what else do we want to fill up our core with? There's a lot of things you can do. You could do Warhounds, which are, I think, gain in value now that the Herdstone exists. I'm just going to default to a couple of Tusco Chariots, and that puts us at 523 points. So let's just tweak this down a little bit. There we go. So 17 Gore, and then 3 Razor Gore, 2 Tusco Chariots, takes us just above the 500 points of core we have to spend. Into Special, here's the things that we need to fit in. We've got a Herdstone. Every arm is going to take one. This is really good for us. It's more leadership debuffing and other buffs. Then we're going to go with, over here, we're going to go with 1 Praeton. Grand Army can take a single Praeton, so we're going to be doing that. And like I said, we can play around with whether this is worth the 160 points, but we will see. Then we're going to move on to the rare slots. And I really want to Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, sorry. We're not going to buy it heavy armor because we're going to buy it the Chaos Armor. The full plate Chaos Armor here gives you a 4-up armor save, combines with that Armored Hide 2 to get you up to a 2-up armor save, gives you a 5-up ward as well, and then it's just pretty beefy. It starts off at 5 attacks. It's Strength 6 base, so that gets you up to Strength 8. You just hit pretty hard. You've got a couple of stomp attacks. Armor Bane is hilarious. Between the Great Weapons Armor Bane and your Armor Bane, if you roll a 6 to wound, it's just AP -5. You can't even get an armor save that high, so really nice. Really solid stuff. And then worst comes to worst, you've got magical attacks if you get charged by a Banshee as well. Also, key to note, it causes terror. That's really nice because you can use it to try and terror bomb and get people to run away. And speaking of terror bombing, let's go for some more missile units that can cause terror. Missile sort of like relatively tanky solo units. I think with this many points remaining, I'm going to start off by going Shartax with heavy armor and great weapons. The reason you upgrade to a Shartak is it gets you a 4th attack here. You're pretty tanky. You've got a 3-up armor save from your heavy armor and your Armored Hide 2. 4 wounds. They're just pretty beefy. So what does it look like if we put 3 of them in the list? That takes us to 1997. I think this is a solid place to start with the terror-causing list. And you might be surprised that actually it looks like we've got a lot of the similar sort of things, but we have built in some... Oh, we haven't gone for the Manbane. Oh. I was too busy talking. Screw it. We're going to go for Mangelder. Mangelder is... There we go. So our Wargore is suddenly a little bit squishier, so we are keeping the heavy armor shield, which does put us a point over. So we'll have to tweak points here just a little bit. So there's no easy way to do this here. I think let's take out the Tusco Chariot and then just fill in with something like 2 units of Warhounds, with Vanguard, and 2 more gore. Takes us perfectly to 2,000 points, but you can play around with the core. There's a lot of different bits and pieces you can do here. So the playstyle is we've got the big unit of gore with the Manbane standard for -1 to leadership within 6 inches. Kalmore can join that unit for another -1 leadership within 6 inches. The War Gore causes terror with the Mangelder, which means -1 to leadership when you're in base to base with it. And then we've got, the Fighty Doom Bull in there as well. So if you charge in or get charged, this unit here, potentially if you win, your opponent is testing at -3 leadership for their, their break test. That's before you cast any spells on them as well. So just a nice, good old reliable there. You don't need any dice rolls to go your way other than winning a combat, which you probably can do because you've got, decent character here. And then a super tanky character to soak a load of hits. Depending where he's positioned, he can actually save the life of a couple of gore with his T5 and his 4 reward save. But then you've just got other generic good stuff in the list as well here. So I think this works really well. Potentially you want more terror causes, but we've got 2 here, and then we've got the big unit that causes terror as well. So let me know what you think about the list. I wanted to ride the line between this is going to be effective at doing the job that I've set it up to do, which is causing, terror tests, leadership debuffing, trying to play around with Devolve. You do lack Viletide, which does suck, but outside of that, you've got another, a lot more angles of attack, while still just bringing stuff that's generically good. Razor Gore, really good. Tusker Chariot's pretty decent. The Herdstone, really good. You're going to see it in every list. Dragon Ogres, really good. You've seen those in Warriors of Chaos and Beastmen. The Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, I think that's really good now that you can get it up to a 2-up save and a 5-up ward. So, yeah. Let me know if there's any tweaks that you'd make to the list, but this is what I'm thinking in terms of the terror causing list, and I'll definitely be trying to get some games in with it sooner rather than later. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Grail Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Grail Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.